economy coming. And we have the panel discussion is chaired by Hörður Kristinsson, Science and Innovation Officer from Matís, Hörður. And Helga Sigurós Valgeirsdóttir, Senior Account Manager at the seafood team in Arion Bank.
Thank you very much.
And I will give the word over to you, or do you want me to introduce the panelists?
We can take care of that.
Okay.
So. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. This is a fantastic session, and I love the turnout. This is a very important topic we're talking about today. How do we disrupt seafood? And before we actually go to the panel, we have a little change of schedule, only a couple of minutes. We're actually going to use the opportunity to sign an MOU. This is between Matís and the School of Food Science at the University of Idaho and Washington State University. This is actually I shouldn't say old, but my old professor from the University of Washington many, many years ago. And we're excited to tell you that we're going to be working together on disrupting the seafood industry, both in the US and in Iceland, learning from each other in education, research and development, and commercialization. So here you go, guys.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So, on to the panel. Ladies and gentlemen. You guys.
If you just step up, I think we have your names written. Most of the panelists already had introductions today, but we would like for those of you who haven't spoken today just to give us a brief intro. Okay, we are together. Yeah, this is a party game. Jane, if you would start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Jane Eady. I'm from Newfoundland and Labrador. I host a radio show for the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. It's a radio show all about the ocean and obviously the fishery.
Okay. Marta.
Hello, Marta Iglesias from the European Commission, following the research and innovation programs. In particular, I'm scientific officer for seafood, aquaculture, innovation and SMEs.
Okay. Last but not least, Guðmundur. You spoke yesterday, but if you could just give us...
Yes, I'm from Iceland. I'm a Brim seafood company here in Iceland, and I'm an Icelander. I come from a small village, fishing village, and I've been working in the seafood industry my whole life.
Okay. The way we would like to do this today, if you have some questions, just feel free to step up and find the mic and direct your questions to the panelists. Me and Hörður, we have few questions by ourselves. We're going to try to be brief. If you have introduce yourself quickly, direct your question to some of the panelists, and maybe the panelists can talk a bit among yourself, keep this lively. Hörður, but you prepared, didn't you?
Yes, we have a very diverse group of people here. People who know a lot about their industries, know a lot about not just their industries, but the market and the consumers as well. So one big question for all of you, so what, in your opinion, we can start with Guðmundur and we can move down. What will be the impact that you think of technological disruptions on seafood and also the industry and the blue bioeconomy?
Can you say this question again?
Say it again. What will be the impact of technical disruptions on the seafood industry, on your industry, and also on the whole blue bioeconomy that we're working in?
Yes. What is hard for us in the seafood industry to learn is that now we have to cope with the market. Before we like to fish when we like, and we salted the fish or froze it, but now the market wants it faster. Also, we need to take care of the environment. We cannot overfish, and we have to be careful. And then we have all this new technology we are getting. So we will change our fisheries because we have to serve the market and listen to the market. And also, but what we have also had trouble is I heard a good word this morning here, is a shareholder and a stakeholder. In Iceland, we have a big problems because we have been thinking of the shareholders who are running the company, but then we have a big fight with the communities and the people in the country because they don't understand why we are doing this. But actually we are doing it because we are trying to cope with the market. And there's no use to go out fishing if nobody wants to buy our fish. So it will definitely be a big change in the next years.
But Lynette, do you think that will Guðmundur be producing fish for your printer, or how will the value chain be?
Yeah, well, Natural Machines is not focused solely on seafood, but seafood is a very important industry for us. One of our investors is actually based out of New York, and they are very big on circular economy and lowering food waste. So it's actually quite a big issue for us at Natural Machines. And seafood fits naturally with that because there are a lot of issues with sustainability, using the entire fish and making things more green in that industry. So yes, I do think you will see a lot of seafood coming into 3D food printing that can help with the sustainability issues.
Okay.
So, moving to Oliver, how do you think we need to adapt to this new consumer, the seafood industry? You talked about stories, but yeah.
I mean, it's in coming here, I've had the opportunity to look at a lot of different industries that I would have never looked at, seafood being one of them. And I think it's the same thing that happens whenever technology goes into any of the other businesses. I mentioned that I've had a first-hand look at it. Right now you have the idea of a fisher person on the ocean, right? Whether they're, as you said, whether they get to fish when they want to or fish when they need to or when the market demands it. You have a processor, you have somebody that's kind of pulling the logistics of all of that, you have somebody that helps it get through customs, you have somebody that helps it distribute it to the end customer. That chain is going to do this, right? Because that's what technology does. It simplifies and it connects the dots, so to speak. And so all of those people in the middle will be disrupted, right? And all of the people at the edges have new behaviors. And so that, in a simple form, is what's going to happen. It's inevitable. I'm watching it happen because the market always dictates what the chain below it does. We don't live in a world anymore where there is one pipe to the consumer, where there is one channel on television that you have to watch, or one distributor of a product like seafood. There are a lot of different entrants. I mean, if you look at America, the idea that Blue Apron just went public is astonishing to me, right? Meal delivery kits, like that didn't exist 5 years ago, 10 years ago, or it existed very locally, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar company. And the idea of Amazon, which is all about, of course, fleet management, distribution management, direct-to-consumer, has now bought Whole Foods. Those are massive disruptions that we're all aware of, but you can see where it's going. It's going from customer demand to primary producer and direct connections in that respect.
Jane, Siggi talked about it in his presentation this morning. We heard about it from HB Grant yesterday, all this automation going on within our industry already. Newfoundland, Iceland, maybe not that different economies. Do you see any social impacts of those technology
This has been such
disruptions?
a valuable conference for me because when you have all of you people in one place, it allows you to connect the dots between technology and social change, but not just social change, but social improvement. In Newfoundland, we are in a very difficult position right now. I don't know if many of you are familiar with our economy, but we are heavily dependent on oil and gas, and because of the downturn in that industry, we have some very big economic challenges. But the bright spot is that we also have delicious seafood. And to your point earlier, we have authenticity. We have really creative and colorful characters in our province. So the dots that I have connected over the last few days, I guess, start with quality. That's always a big discussion on our show, is quality of fish. So it's about using the latest technology to achieve that quality. And, that's all about the catching methods. That's all about the preservation methods. Yesterday, even, I learned about deep chill and this pearl-shaped ice that can improve the quality of the fish by not puncturing the skin. So it gets to the consumer in a near-perfect state. And so what I hope will happen as a result of improvements in technology is that the consumer will eat our fish and then wonder about this wonderful place, Newfoundland and Labrador, that has this delicious seafood, will demand it in the marketplace, will come and visit us, and it will then get a higher price for harvesters, for processors. And it's not all about money, but I think what that does is when you earn more money and people want your product, you have pride and you have confidence. And that pride and confidence will prompt you to explore new opportunities that can generate revenue and, as I said, bring about improvement in social change.
So Marta, you work for the Commission.
Yes.
And to make all this happen, we need funding. Could be from private funding, but also
Right.
from public funding. So
Right.
we're talking about technological disruption. So the current funding models, does that work for the future, or do we have to change how we fund research?
We have to adapt the funding models to the times that we are living now. In fact, we are moving the Research and Innovation Program, Horizon 2020, in our field from demonstrating the potential to harvesting its potential. Let's say, first we have several series of projects where they're developing knowledge. Now we want this knowledge to come closer to the market. And now we are entering into a phase where this valley of death, where the knowledge is there but the commercial application is not there yet, will be provided support in terms of funding or this ecosystem support in order to make the innovation happen. Because entrepreneurs need to have the right ecosystem, a balance of knowledge, demand, market, perspective. So we will make sure at the European level that this ecosystem is in place, and then to support entrepreneurs to come this innovation a reality. Because in Europe, we are very well known of an excellent knowledge, but that knowledge is taken outside Europe and transformed into technical application where Europeans go and buy them. So we want, let's say, to invert this cycle and have this innovation happen in Europe, because the side effect is that growth and job will be done in Europe. So this technological application innovation in the seafood sector will bring along other sectors like this logistics, the way the Internet of Things is applying, so you need a new skills, new workforce different from what we have now, but to be involved in the sector. So my view is that it will have collateral effects and benefits from all the food chain, from producers to transformers, logistics, retailers to consumers. So I'm very optimistic about this, but we have to be really open and try to support our entrepreneurs, because we have brilliant ideas in Europe, but we need to provide the right support to them.
Excellent. And I hope you remember blue when you go back to the Commission, that we need to fund the blue bioeconomy.
You will
obviously,
see
for the future. Excellent.
I have one question. Again, please feel free to step up to the mics if you want to ask the panelists anything. It's not a very blue question, but Lynette, why do you call it a printer? Because I started thinking about it. I relate printers to empty, expensive cartridges, and I don't relate it to food in any way. Yeah. And you saw it while you were talking to the audiences. On your little TV shows, if you told them it was printed, they didn't want it. But how come? Could you elaborate on this a bit?
You could say there's a particular branding issue that we've been working through there. However, the fact of the matter is the technology is printing. It's 3D printing. So when we first started the company, we were thinking, okay, it sounds too techy or not fresh, not nutritious. Should we call it something else? The fact of the matter is that 3D printing in general is such a buzzword right now. Mm-hmm. We get a ton of press off of it, quite frankly. Okay. And if we called it anything else, whether it's I don't know, I wouldn't even know what to call it, but a 3D printer at this point, but if we called it anything else besides a 3D food printer, we probably wouldn't even be on the stage today. So we wouldn't be speaking to as many people as we're talking to and creating the noise in the market. Now, when we talk about 3D food printing, admittedly, it's not all positive connotations in the market. We get people who love it to people who hate it and everybody in between. So it does take some work from our behalf to convince the haters that, hey, it's not fake food, it's real food, it's fresh food, you're controlling it, it's proper food. And we can do that quite easily, all things considered. But at this point, it's really because it gets people talking, and that's what we want when you have such a new technology. There's nothing in the past that's like a 3D food printer. So we're not an improvement of a microwave or an improvement of an oven. We're something totally different. We're localized manufacturing. And at this point, we are 5 years old, but in the scope of company world that's not really that old. We're still a very young company. So at this point, we decided to keep the term 3D food printing because it gets that dialogue going, it gets people passionate about it. And the other thing is, since it's a 3D food printer, everybody gets passionate about food. Everybody has their own opinions of what's healthy, what's not, what's good, what's bad. And that to us is a conversation starter, which is exactly where we want to be with it.
So, before we open the floor to questions, then, Sigurður, Marel, amazing company, amazing technologies, amazing engineers. How do you, foresee robotics really changing the seafood industry in the future?
Yeah, I think what we are going to see is that we are, with this technology, we are enabling remote areas, basically to harvest or process the cats. And what will happen is that you will be able to process closer to the source or either closer to the market. So what we are seeing is that the carbon footprint, where you are transferring the cats to process it somewhere else and then back into the market. So we are definitely, with this technology, we are getting the carbon footprint down. And then at the same time, you have the robots are definitely overbeating humans in everything that they do. It's the accuracy, it's the yield, it's everything, basically. So I think the future is really bright in that sense.
Maybe just one question to all of you, if we start with Guðmundur and we would end at Oliver. We saw it in, I think it was Anthony's presentation today, that you're showing pictures of food. You're not showing pictures, or you're showing pictures of meals, rather than pictures of sea or boats, or if you're shopping for, let's say, if I'm going out shopping for a steak, I see a picture of steak, throw in a glass of red wine, and I'm buying it. I'm not looking at the picture of the cow. But when we are telling the Icelandic story, Guðmundur, we start to talk about the ocean, we talk about the fish in the ocean and the villages. You talk about the story on the social media to show, tell the story of the whole process. Is there a difference between agriculture and aquaculture and then seafood in general in relations to food marketing?
I have a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of opinions in
Yeah,
general.
just please grab the words.
I mean, look, I think this is the big disconnect, the questions that you've been asking me so far, is we don't have to get to one great image that sums up everything about a product in a glossy photo in a magazine anymore, right? It's like when I used to sit down with movie creators, I would say, take a storyboard, right, of all the different scenes of the movie that have lovable characters that keep you on the edge of your seat. They all have a set of rules, like we're all going to build a fundamental story architecture. But you're going to take all of those pieces of that storyboard, and instead of making a linear movie, we're going to put a photo up on Instagram of this aspect of the brand and this value. We're going to put a little vignette video over here on YouTube. We're going to have a conversation between two people on Facebook. We're going to distribute the storytelling among the platforms that we're looking at because the consumer wants to discover these things. Consumer behavior on the internet is a constant flow of connected dots and connected objects inside of a social graph. And so you will never get that one great image that will be all of the content to one person to motivate them to want to buy something. So it's all about this idea of discovery. I mean, there's a very simple catchphrase, which is, when you're marketing something like an experience, right? Because food has become an experience for people, right? They take photos of it, they show you going to the restaurant, they take, here's what my meal looks like, here's the, I met the chef, here's my selfie, I went to this location. So that's all, like, give them the pieces to tell that narrative. And so there's a great rule to this, which is, whenever you're doing it inside of these new platforms, it's you make the content that matters, but that means a lot of different people it matters to, right? Because of the nature of the content. So if you make the content that matters and you put it and you use these tools to put it in front of the people it matters to, right? Sometimes from voices that matter to them at a time that matters to them, right? And so once you do that matrix of storytelling, and it's really matrix storytelling, then suddenly you say, okay, the ocean is important to this person because they involve, they're interested in the value of sustainability. And so I'm going to then show the story of traceability, which is the exact manifestation of sustainability matched with this consumer and the data given to them. That's that story thread, right? And so it's not one object anymore, right? It's not one TV commercial. It's a whole bunch of things.
I think this is a challenge not only to Icelandic seafood industry, also I would say the whole world. Because in the old days, we didn't want to tell anything about us because we were fishing secretly. Nobody wanted to know our best place to fish. And all our production was secret. Today, we have to have it totally open and, like you're saying, transparent. And also now the fishermen have to realize that the customer who is eating the fish, he maybe wants to know about them. So he wants to have a picture of them. So that means that we have to take care of the boat, of the fish, how we are, because people want to know more about us. So it's like like one of the videos about in China is saying is that you cut a lot in the middle because you connect the fisherman and the end consumer. And that will come more in the future, like you're saying, and the stories. And that is a challenge for us. But I think the industry and the people there, we can do it. But that means a lot of education in all the fishing industries, not only in Iceland, but at least in North Atlantic.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience at this point?
Yes, please.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Hayford. I know technology is very good. As much as it's good, it also will have its negative side of it. The last person on the extreme right, not the facilitator.
That's me.
Yes. He said something very nice about the supply chain, the production chain, using a lot of robots. I mean, to be able to do a lot that human beings would have done. Now, within that chain, it means that you take these human beings out, and they will be displaced. And they must survive, just like the facilitator said, they must survive. But how do they survive? I foresee that there is likelihood that as they are going to be displaced, you're going to increase the level of unemployment in the state. And if the government does not come out with policy to absorb these people and shift them to another sector, it's going to create a challenge. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that? How do you think this technology, robots, and the rest can address unemployment in the system? Yeah.
I think basically the challenge that we are facing, which is the growth in the world population. That means that we need to process more food, and as I showed in my presentation, there will be a need for 50% more processing at 2050. So it's the volume that is definitely, we cannot just do it by hand, so that's why we need automation to step in. And then again, I think it also depends on where you are, like in Iceland or whether you are in a third level country. So it is definitely a line that you need to put in the sand and balance between the humans and the automation, the machines. And what I feel that I worked in Namibia, for instance, and there definitely there was a need to keep basically people in the plants. And then we looked at the plants and we figured out we were trying to eliminate the tasks that were repetitive or difficult for the people to work on. And then we focused on that and we replaced that with some kind of automation. So I think these are just the steps that we need to take. So it's not that it will just happen by night in all countries. Definitely some are ahead of us in this. But I think at the end of the day, things will speed up and we will see more innovation or more technology coming in. And I think it will allow like remote areas to process closer to the source. So I think that's the key in this development.
Sveinn.
Just a quick question to you, Sigurður. I know your booth in Icefish is filled with lots of interesting stuff, robotics and everything. But I'm pretty sure there's no food printer. will I be seeing a Marel food printer in the next Icefish exhibition?
I think, like she said, if she would not be calling it a 3D printer, then she would not be here on stage. I believe that we have 3D printers, we have further processing, so we have big divisions making all these cookies, and it's just different names. We have a machine, what we call the RevoPortioner. So it is making like these dinosaurs and all that out of the fish. So definitely, I think we have almost 3D printing there.
What we actually did is we took your concept and we shrunk it down.
Yeah, that's basically what it is.
Trade lawyer.
Innovation.
Please.
Thank you. My question is also addressed to Marel, or anybody else can answer. I am Alam from Bangladesh. Well, as we know today, that world is producing almost 160 million tons of seafood. And out of that, 50% is coming from culture and 50% from capture. So do you think that as the population is increasing by 2050, we will have almost 9.5 billion people, so we will need another 100 million tons of fish. And these additional 100 million tons of fish are not going to come from the wild capture. So the alternative is the culture. So what sort of technology do you think that in the culture industry, if it could be utilized, this additional fish supply could be ensured for the world community as a whole? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think what we saw yesterday, yesterday and today as well, like for instance in Norway, then there are basically boundaries or a restriction on how fast they can grow. And what they are doing now, they're looking at alternatives. They're going out into the seas, and they have now practical solutions that they are implementing, and just the future will tell whether that will be a success or not. I believe that we will find a way to increase the aquaculture, and I'm not sure how far we can reach, but definitely there are a lot of opportunities. We can see in the tilapia, it's now in many ponds, and the processing is far from what we see like in the poultry and the other industries, or even within the fish industry. So it is a sector that the equipment provider have not been focusing on. So there is a lot of technology that we can transfer into these sectors and modernize and get it up to a beat, so we can get actually more through these channels. So I think that's what is going to happen. It's the consolidation of the sector, and you will have different species that are coming in as well.
Martha, we can see it with aquaculture in Norway that the biggest players there are buying up white fish companies as well, so they're expanding. Within Europe, do you know if this is a general trend or?
Yes, if you see the production in Europe, taking into account Norway production, it goes up. If you take away Norway, it's completely flat. Mm-hmm. So we have to do something to boost the European aquaculture. So we are looking for new ways, like going offshore, but that needs to have good knowledge in many fields, such as the materials to be used offshore, how to deal with unwanted conditions, weather conditions, and also all the problems with transport, logistics, and to grant licenses, because they are competing for space with other sectors like tourism or energy and everything. So we are having, let's say, research project where they are looking into several different possibilities of having new farms offshore, alone or in combination with other activities, in order to find synergies and reduce costs, and at the same time produce for both sectors or more than one sector. So yes, we are looking into this, but it's different completely. The Atlantic, the Mediterranean, or other sea basins in Europe. So we are trying to develop technology that can be applied in many different, supporting the development of technologies. So yeah, and I wanted to add just one thing. The food challenge is not on producing more, but producing better and reduce waste.
Yes.
Because it's an study said that if we manage to reduce 50% of the waste, we could probably feed the world by that time. So we should change a bit our mind of let's produce more and more, but let's do it better. Maybe with the levels of production today, if we don't lose food in the food chain, even consumer, they dispose a lot of food, probably we will have better position for the food challenge. So I would like to see that it's a niche for innovation.
Oliver, you would like to reflect
Can
on
I
this?
ask quick question?
Yep.
Can you give me 3 reasons why aquaculture is so vilified inside of, I mean, I'm coming at this from a novice, but just from brief conversations I've had and then lots of research, like it's overwhelmingly negative sentiment
Yes.
around aquaculture when it seems to be a sustainable path. So why is that?
And even sometimes healthier than the wild
Exactly.
catches because you know what the fish is eating,
Correct.
you are controlling the health of. It's just a bad image because it's considered an intensive farm, and all the
But
intensive.
who did it? Who propagated? Because
I think
somebody's
it's the-
behind the propagation of negative information because
Yes.
it's really, you know.
In fact, we are trying to launch from the Commission a campaign to build trust in aquaculture. So we are having this farm in the EU, and we are trying to have in place this traceability and inform consumers of their choice, because I think it's just a misleading information that has been floating around. Because as I said, sometimes it's much healthier and than wild fish. So I know this is an issue.
Messaging.
Huh?
You probably need better messaging.
We are
It's
doing
all
our best for
protein.
that. In fact, all our research and innovation projects go outside to take the consumers on board, to say what will reassure you that the product that we are producing is good for you. What will be your, let's say, worries, concerns to buy an aquaculture fish better than a wild fish? Even if you do the test with the consumer, this has been proved. Trying this wild fish and trying the same aquaculture, they don't see the difference. I mean, sometimes they say, oh, it's less tasty, or it's not true. I mean, there's a misleading negative publicity for the aquaculture, and this is a bumper in our European aquaculture. We are producing less, but we are importing a lot from the outside, and people don't really know that they are buying aquaculture products from the outside. So it's we have to work out with the public opinion, of course.
I think in general, we as an industry, we need to be better at branding ourselves and telling the story, like
Yes.
Oliver's talked about. And we do have a question from the audience.
Yes, hi, Polly Legendre again. I kind of touched on that yesterday in my presentation, that there's a lot of infighting actually that happens inside the seafood industry, where we've pitted these silos of, you know, farmed versus wild, and instead of looking at other categories out there, and like I was saying, you know, in the States, it's beef, it's what's for dinner, and that's a simple, unified message that's come out. And seafood, we've yet to get consolidated and have a front that just
I mean,
says
you have
seafood.
a finite resource. So you can't fight, you have a finite resource.
Exactly. So the one thing that I kind of wanted to bring up is kind of joining together some of the different you know, subjects that you guys are covering on the panel, and that I kind of wanted to bring up, it's not an either or, in that, you know, there's processing, and, you know, there's that story, or there's the story of the ocean, or there's the story of the people or the waste. And then this whole idea of virtual reality and how people are paying with their phones and looking at these things online and posting stuff that seems intangible. This is just a bridge of those experiences. Food still is food. It's still something, we might share food online in a virtual manner, but we also share food together. We can share a plate. We can sit down with each other and share a meal, share a story. And we're doing that virtually, and we're doing that in reality. So if we start thinking about this as a cohesive approach, instead of this, well, it's either virtual or it's real, and you can't have both. But we can have both, because this is about experiences, and those things are still very real. So I just kind of wanted to throw the food component back in there of what that sharing means, and something like, you know, we can do reduced food waste and efficient processing, and then what does that mean with, you know, the ocean conservation in the country that we're at, and what does that mean as a value of where we decide to live, or where we decide to eat, and where we decide to go. All of these things are just incredibly related.
Guðmundur, at the first end of the fishing, the processing, maybe you're the first end of the value chain. Are you really focused on the end consumer, or do you trust the next steps of the value chain to take over?
In the old days, we trust the middleman, but not today, because what we have been doing the last decade is that we have learned that you must cool the catch immediately after you fish it. You cannot wait 1 or 2 days to get it rotten or spilled. And also what is necessary for the seafood industry is we need rules. We need to have law and rules. Otherwise, we try to catch as much as possible, and we are just wasting a lot of resources. So we need good rules, good law, and then we can start to build on it. And we have been doing that here in Iceland, and we have some species we are utilizing, I would say close to 100%. But we have other species which we are not utilizing yet, but we will utilize it, and it just takes time.
One more question? Yeah.
Please.
Thank you. My name is Erling Larsen. I come from DTU Aqua, Denmark. I have a question. The general trend for food and fish are among the most widespread commodities you have in the world. It's the most traded thing that you have in the world. And that is that it's branded as private labels in the supermarkets, hypermarkets, and then suddenly it disappears where the fish come from. And what I have heard today is that you want to stress that it's from a particular area or a particular quality, but it's not what the consumer wants. Could you elaborate a bit about that? And before,
Are you sure that's not what the consumer wants, or it's what the consumer is imposed upon?
Is there a difference?
There's a big difference. For Costco to call it, what's it called, Highland, or what, I forgot the, Kirkland, that's Costco's decision.
But
and Costco actually wants to move to brands that have individual stories. They're actually moving away from the idea of Kirkland, right? Because they know consumers
you're coming
ask for
from the US, which is really market-driven, and what is behind the market-driven? Is it the one who sells the product or the one who buys the product? So maybe we should start defining that. But I have one question more, and that's the title of the discussion, panel discussion here. And I would like to know, because it says something about our future. Is traditional fisheries dead? You have not reached that.
No, maybe I think that's a good final question. If we just start at Siggi and move.
Yeah.
Is traditional fisheries dead?
Yeah, is traditional fishing dead? I would not. Definitely, it will consist for years to come. But the key thing there is that we are doing it in a sustainable way. That we have regulated fisheries. So then I foresee that it will be there for years to come. And then we have just the aquaculture and all the methods just on top of that to feed the nations or feed the world.
What do you say, Jane?
No, absolutely not. It's not dead. I don't know if you heard a presentation the other day about Fogo Island, which is an island off the island of Newfoundland. And they have gone back to handlining from small boats to very traditional methods. And they're getting top dollar for that quality fish in the Canadian market. So, no, it's far from dead.
I also agree it's far from that as well, but it will evolve with the new technologies and everything. They will embed the new advantages of the innovations to adapt to the environment. But traditional fisheries is important as recreational fisheries, so we will have, let's say, different levels of fisheries depending on the activity itself, but it's not there.
I mean, I see a whole opportunity for a renaissance of it because you can actually tell consumer stories. I mean, in America, I know it's tremendously market-driven, but I think that consumers in Europe and all over the world are sitting there on a device that's selling them something 24 hours a day. Just because you don't see the billboards or the kind of gross consumerism that you do in America, people are making their decisions based on content that they're consuming on mobile devices. It's just an inevitability, it's a total fact. And so what I believe is going to happen is a real renaissance of the Copper River salmons, of the, Fogo Island, whatever. And those are going to be particular products that have a higher value. Like, when I moved here, I have no concept of why Icelandic fish is not a #1 brand worldwide and labeled as such, because it's coming from one of the purest places in the world. And that's important to me as a consumer. I will make that decision to buy line-caught Icelandic fish because of all of the values associated with that.
Do you mind if I have a comment? There is a reason why I became a researcher and not a fisherman like my father, my grandfather, and my great-grandfather. That was that I didn't want to fish traditionally. So what you are saying is you want the fish as they were fished then with modern methods. So the question is maybe wrongly put. It's not the traditional fisheries that is dead. They have been dead a long time ago. No, what we want is the original foodstuff that was fished at that time. It's about fish as food that we want as pure, as good as such.
Thank you. Lynette, what do you say?
I think innovation and opportunity were the two words that I heard from the panelists I totally tap into. So the industry is changing. The thing is there's no one right answer. You said that before as well. And not everybody wants to know the story of where the fish came from. Some people just want fish for dinner, and they might not care about if it's Icelandic or Canadian. So I think with the industry, there's a lot of opportunity to tap into all those different areas because it is evolving with technology from the fishing boats all the way to getting the food to the table. And when you talk about things like IoT or Internet of Things and data, you have the opportunity, you don't have to use all the data, but the data is there to either create those more advanced stories that tell the entire story of that fishery and how your fish came to your plate, or to making it much more efficient for people who just want fish for dinner and aren't too bothered about the story, they can tap into that. So I think with the innovation aspect, there's a lot of opportunity for the industry, but there's no one right approach to it, which creates the opportunity for the industry.
We need to wrap up, don't we? If
Okay.
traditional fisheries.
This is a good question because when you say traditional fisheries, are you looking 50 years back, 100 years, or 1,000 years, or 2,000 years back? Exactly. Because for me, it's that I know when the trawler came and we had the diesel engines, we thought we could fish endless, but then we finished the fish stocks. So I think the traditional fisheries will always keep on, but we will change methods. We will work like the society wants us at each time. And today, we want to take care of the resources. We want to bring good fish to the market. We want to tell stories. And we don't want to be poor fishermen. And we don't want to be seasick. You know, everybody who has been on a fishing boat, on a small boat, you know, you get maybe seasick. And also, why should we go out in a small boat when there's a bad weather forecast? You know, we want a decent boat. We want a decent living. And we will work with the technology, with the markets. You can call it a traditional fishery after 50, 100 years, but we will cope with society at each time. That's what I believe in.
Excellent. Great ending, good question. What is traditional fisheries? Like you said, 1,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 100 years from now, we're still going to call it traditional, but it's going to be different, so every time. So,
Thank you,
excellent
guys.
session. Guys, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.